Hey there, I'm Sharon Welch, and welcome to A Brave Journey, the podcast to help you throw out those legacy belief and identity stories that you've been lugging around on autopilot for decades, so you can jump back in the driver's seat of your aliveness again. When you change your mind, you change your life. Are you ready? Let's get into it. It'll be fun. I have plenty of time while I'm traveling to be alone with myself, as you can imagine. To me, that's not a terrible thing. I enjoy my solitude, which is different from loneliness. But it did have me thinking, as I have this time to really just be with myself, how also lonely the journey of transformation can be for many of us. For a lot of reasons. Number one, your personal transformation is truly a journey that you walk by yourself. You may have support and assistance from other people or other situations, but at the end of the day, it's your journey and your journey alone. And that's fine. That's a good thing. And also, because of our self-talk and the way that our ego constantly chatters at us, it also can feel actually lonely, like nobody else in the world is experiencing what I'm experiencing. Nobody else in the world is having crazy thoughts like I have. And I think if we allow those voices to be the ones that, rule the mood, rule the day, we can very easily become more and more insular and become less and less connected with those who are around us, who could be inspiring to us, who could be supportive to us, who could just be empathetic to the path that we're on and what we're trying to do to bring out that authentic identity, that part of ourselves that we've been putting an Instagram filter on or pushing down because we've been worried about our acceptability. So I've been thinking a lot about that, about how, this really is a solo journey and how it's really easy to lose that connection. And I think it comes down to a couple things that we do. One being that we hide these things, we hide these thoughts, we hide this experience that we are having from each other. And two, when we have thoughts that seem crazy or destructive or counterproductive, we sort of freak out a little bit on ourselves and we try to push those down as well. Let's talk about that pivotal red flag, that moment of clarity that jolts you out of autopilot. You've heard me say many times over the years how because we are all afraid to be vulnerable or to appear less than perfect, we hide from each other. We create a facade around ourselves so that how we live our life and the experiences that we have appear to be acceptable and perfect and sparkly to the outside world, when inside we may be crumbling. And we think we're the only one that's having to do that, that everyone else has it all figured out. And we're the only ones lagging behind through some defect that we have. But it's actually the exact opposite. Everybody is doing that. So we're all seeing the facades, but thinking we're the only ones that have the facades. And so it's this never-ending cycle where we perpetuate that while inside we're cringing at how we're actually failing at life. So I had an interesting experience. I was on a trip to Las Vegas and I got into a conversation with a man that I had met there. And we were sitting there, people watching and getting to know each other and having a conversation. And he was telling me a little bit about how he had ended up working in the hospitality industry in Las Vegas. This is a man who, he got out of college and he started moving up in the banking world. He started off as a teller, then he was moved up to private banker eventually and doing all this stuff. And then he got into property management and he was making, great 6-figure income, all of that sort of thing. And he started to tell me about this pivotal moment, this moment of clarity that he had. He was driving to work one morning
And he's thinking to himself, man, I've got the job, I've got the money, I've got the home, I've got the cool car. I have the partner that I'm supposed to have. I have this perfect life. It seems like I have everything that I need to have to make it. I'm doing it. I have this level of success. And yet he realized that often he would just sort of daydream about, well, what would happen if I just, swerved into oncoming traffic or just got into enough of an accident, not enough to, really, hurt me really terribly, but just enough so that I wouldn't have to go into work today, or I wouldn't have to try to find things in common or make up a conversation with my spouse who's supposed to be perfect for me. And he was horrified at this realization, just horrified that literally he would have these flashes in his mind about bodily injury or accidents or calamities to befall him as a way to escape the seemingly perfect life. And I was just dumbstruck because I've had those experiences myself. I've had those daydreams. I've had those bizarre, twisted fantasies about what if some calamity befell me that would cause me to have a different life, or at least put the one I had on pause, even though to everyone else, all the input I was getting from friends, family, society was that I had a perfect, sparkling life. And in that moment, I realized, I was reminded once again that we all hide from each other. Many of us have these experiences. I felt really seen then. And I let him know that I had had those same experiences. And I think he had sort of that moment of understanding that said, oh, wow, I thought I was crazy. He's not crazy. I'm not crazy. You're not crazy. It's just how we're conditioned. And so that was really impactful to me. And, we went on to have this conversation about how there's all these shoulds in the world, the job you should have and the degree you should have and the partner you should have and the friends you should have and the car you should drive and the life you should live. And these are all the measures of success. These are all the measures that say that you're winning at life. When really, if we're all honest with ourselves, the highest level of success that you can have in your life is your happiness, your contentment, and creating an environment where you can facilitate that in others. Living to seek out and contribute happiness in the world is seen as irresponsible and self-indulgent. You may have actually had a flash of that thought as I put that out there, saying, finding and spreading happiness and contentment should be our ultimate goal. You may have had those same visceral reactions. Oh, that's frivolous. Oh, there's much more important things to do in the world. But is there? Is there really? Look at what is happening in the world right now. Look at the level of sadness, frustration, anger. Look at the constant pressure to keep up, to one up, to conquer, to win, to whatever it is. Think about that. Where is the happiness? Where is the contentness? Where is the sense of enough?
Why is it then that we do hide from each other? What is the cause of that feeling that we have to suppress all of those things that are really who we truly want to be trying to come out? There was an article a few years ago in Forbes magazine about that. And one of the things that he was talking about was just like I was saying, we tend to wear these masks, these personas for various reasons, hide our fears or past wounds, that sort of thing. So what happens when you have that many layers is pretty soon you kind of lose touch with who that true inner self is. And that paradox is that we end up denying the very person that we are, our true self, the right to exist. So, we have this lack of validation and recognition that we so desperately want. And also, we're not putting out this true identity that we want to have validated and recognized anyway, because we're hiding behind all of the filters and all of the suppression of the things that aren't so shiny, because we're then also a fear of rejection and of not being accepted. So we as humans live in this paradox where we really can't win. We want the validation, we want the recognition, but to be our true selves, we risk rejection and not being loved. And that's a tough place. So we hide from each other. But what's interesting, and I touched on this a little bit last time when we were talking about conformity, sometimes to get the ball rolling, if you think about it, we could totally create this whole new wave of people being able to show up authentically and be supported and celebrated by taking that one step. So I've had a couple of experiences in the last year where I've spoken publicly at a couple of organizations that I belong to, sharing a little part of my story, being vulnerable, showing a little bit of my, less than desirable parts of my history or myself. And what was fascinating when I looked around the room every time I've done that is that glimmer of recognition, that moment of connectedness with another person in the room who gets it or who had the aha moment that, oh my gosh, me too. I also experienced that. I thought I was the only one. And it's like this huge weight comes off of your shoulder when you find that you're not the only one. Your thoughts aren't crazy. So the guy in Las Vegas who had the crazy thought of driving off the side of the road, lots of people have had that experience, just not lots of people talk about it. Lots of people have lost jobs or relationships or a million other things, survived a terrible disease, went through homelessness. There are a number of things that we go through that we feel some level of fear or shame about. And if we can take that one other step and share a little part of that, there's someone out there who needs to hear it. There's someone out there who has just a tiny bit less confidence, a tiny bit less bravery than you do. And all they needed was for you to exercise your little extra bit of bravery so that they felt bolstered as well. And if we really all would do that, if we really all could get real and could get vulnerable with each other, just think of the leaps and bounds we could all make from a personal development, finding your authentic identity perspective. If we found out we're not the only ones. In fact, it's almost guaranteed we're never the only ones going through something. And there's people out there that would love to be able to empathize with what you're going through and tell you their stories as well, but they're hiding from all of us too. So it's something really interesting to think about how we have to become comfortable with paradox in our lives. We have to be willing to be vulnerable and risk the not being acceptable, the judgment, all of those things, if we want to also have the recognition and celebration of who we truly are when we do express it. Interesting, right? And not easy to do, but it is possible. I, even myself, with all the work that I've done, have been really surprised at the reaction that I've gotten when I've taken a deep breath and just decided to do it. And in fact, I find that I attract and draw in far more people who I resonate with when I do that than when I put up the facade that shows me as some perfect superwoman who has all the answers and has all my stuff figured out. Again, it's a paradox that you wouldn't think is true, but it absolutely is. So we all know intellectually that we're not alone. Other people go through what we go through. And we also know that we're not the only person on the planet that has these crazy thoughts about very dramatic ways that we can pull ourselves out of these situations where we feel powerless or where we feel something that is less than authentic and less than great in our desire and mission to fit in. Great. But what does that really mean for us? What do we really do about it? What can we really do about it? And I think there are a number of different answers to that question. The way for us to begin to exercise the muscle, build the muscle,
to stop hiding from each other and to show up for each other and to be real with each other can come about in a number of different ways. Sure, if you're comfortable with public speaking, or even if you're a little nervous about public speaking, but could get through it, sharing some of your story among your group of friends or in a professional organization, or your church or among classmates at school. There are a number of different ways that you could share a little bit of your story. And maybe it's not with a group. Maybe it's with a close friend or a family member. Maybe it's saying it out loud to your therapist if you have a therapist. Therapists are great for that. Coaches, great for that. I've had both, very helpful. And maybe that's too much for you as well. So maybe it's something as simple as writing it down in a journal or typing it or speaking it into a voice memo if you're not big on the whole writing journaling thing. And if you're not even at that point, sometimes it's manufacturing a scenario where you get to practice empathy. So maybe it's something as simple as walking down the street and seeing a random person, and in your mind, role play that that person has just gone through exactly what you've gone through. And in your head, role play maybe, feel what that feels like to know that there's someone else who's gone through what you've gone through. Even though you're making it up, it doesn't matter. Your brain doesn't know the difference. Practicing empathy and practicing what it feels like to be seen and what it feels like to be heard can be hugely powerful as you sort of creep your way into the bravery, the vulnerability to truly on the outside stop hiding from everyone else. So, that's one thing that you can do. The other thing is we have to find a way to accept that our brains, our critter brains, our egos largely do what they want. So when we have these crazy thoughts about, I use the driving off the side of the road because I think it's one that many of us have, or driving in traffic, that many of us have had at one time or another, whether we admit it or not. But there's other really terrible ones that we all have. I'm just going to put it out there. You imagine someone who's difficult in your life dying, right? Can you believe I just said that? I did, because I know that all of us, some of us, many of us, have had that experience. All of these crazy thoughts that we have, self-harm, some terrible tragedy befalling someone else, or maybe it's some crazy miracle happening that's going to pull us out of our misery, whatever it is, these crazy thoughts. Instead of judging ourselves for them, just recognize that we have the thought and let it go. Let it pass us by. This is something that's taught all the time when you do things like meditation or yoga. Your thoughts are going to be your thoughts. It's very difficult to turn them off. And so unless you take the time to become some amazing yogi or meditation person who really can do that, for a lot of the rest of us, it's not about turning off those thoughts. It's about not giving them the power that we were giving them before. You recognize them, you observe that they're there, and then you let them pass. And it takes practice. But I think if you can start in both of those things, trying to be more visible, trying to live with the paradox of we hide our true selves so that we can be accepted, but then we miss out on the validation and acceptance of our true selves because we hide it. Know that that's a thing, and just figure out the best way to navigate that duality in your life. There's going to be some part of that that's always going to be there on both sides. I think the idea is to find your tipping point more towards taking the risk of putting your authentic self out there rather than hiding it away. The rewards are far greater on the side of authenticity if we can just get past our own fear, which again is made up. We've made up that fear. We've decided that that's scary. We've decided for everybody else that if they saw our authentic selves, that they will reject us, that they will not love us. We made that up. So, that being the case, we can just as easily make up something different that says, if I allow my actual identity to come through, if I honor that, I will still be accepted and I still will be loved. And you know what? It might be by different people. It might be by people who you don't even know yet. And yes,
There might be people who have an adverse reaction to it. I'm not going to be Pollyanna about it. That absolutely can happen. But wouldn't it be better to have this sort of toxic swamp of people who only accept you for being someone that you're not fall away so that you can create room for the people who accept you and love you and celebrate you for who you actually are? And that's not a pie in the sky goal. That's literally something that will happen, not just can happen. But oftentimes we're so surrounded by people who are blocking that for us because they are encouraging and celebrating the person that we're not. There's no room for the other to get through. And the people who would resonate with our authentic selves, they don't even recognize that we're that person because we don't ever let that show. I've definitely experienced that in my own life, where when you walk through that fear and that angst over being seen as ridiculous or a failure or not acceptable or not lovable, and in little ways or big ways, you just start doing things the way that you want to do them. Every single time I've done it, somebody shows up, expected or not, who celebrates it and gets it and is so excited to have seen that come out in me. And situations unfold that then encourage that because it's this positive inertia, this positive energy out into the universe that says, oh, here we are. Here's the real person. Now we can start unfolding all of the things that support that. It really does happen. And it's that first step, right? It's that first step off what feels like a cliff. But I promise you won't die by trying to do it. So in big ways or small ways, there are a million different ways that you can start to exercise those muscles, to stop hiding, to accept the crazy thoughts that you have. You're not crazy. You just have a incessant inner dialogue that has to make up crap to tell you. It just does. Acknowledge it, let it go. So let's stop hiding from each other. I would love to hear the different ways that you found to be visible and try it out. I really think we could start a thing here. I really do. I really think if we stop hiding from each other, the power in that of us all really stepping into who we authentically are is huge. I'm super excited about it. I geek out about this all the time, and I hope you do too. And I want to hear some of these stories. And these are the kind of stories I want to talk about. I want to have you come on and talk about with me on this podcast, because that's what it's going to take, is us showing up for each other. So let's do that. Hey, thanks for listening to A Brave Journey. I'm so happy we're here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review, and share this with a friend who could benefit too. See you next time.